which pharaoh mentioned in Quran, as it is learned pharaoh is the title. Is this mistake or something else? In the Quran, the term pharaoh, Arabic transliterated as Pharaoh, is used to refer to the ruler of Egypt during the time of Prophet Moses, Musa. The question of whether pharaoh is a title or a name in the Quran, and whether its usage reflects a mistake, has been debated among scholars and researchers. Based on historical, linguistic, and Quranic analysis, here's an explanation. 1. Pharaoh as a title in historical context. Historical usage. The word pharaoh originates from the Egyptian term parara, great house, initially referring to the royal palace and later, from the New Kingdom period, circa 1550 BCE, used as a title for the king of Egypt. Quranic usage. In the Quran, pharaoh is used specifically for the ruler during Moses' time, mentioned 74 times across 27 chapters. The Quran does not use pharaoh for rulers in other periods, such as the time of Joseph, Yusuf, where the ruler is called king, malik, or al-aziz. Grammatical evidence. The Quran uses pharaoh without the definite article al, for example, Pharaoh instead of al-Pharaoh, which in Arabic grammar typically indicates a proper name rather than a title. Titles in Arabic usually take the definite article like al-Malik for the king. This has led some scholars to argue that the Quran treats pharaoh as a name, not a title. 2. Is this a mistake? Not a mistake, but a deliberate choice. The Quranic use of pharaoh as a name rather than a title is unlikely to be a mistake. The Quran's audience in 7th century Arabia was familiar with biblical narratives, where pharaoh is similarly used as a name-like designation for Egyptian rulers, like in Genesis and Exodus. The Quran appears to adopt this convention to ensure clarity for its audience, associating pharaoh specifically with the tyrannical ruler opposing Moses. Distinction in terminology. The Quran distinguishes between the ruler of Moses' time, pharaoh, and the ruler of Joseph's time, king or al-Aziz. This aligns with historical evidence that the title pharaoh became prominent during the New Kingdom, closer to the traditional timeline of Moses, while earlier rulers were not always referred to as such. Some Muslim apologists argue this reflects the Quran's historical accuracy, though this claim is debated. Cultural context. The Quran's use of pharaoh as a name may reflect its adaptation of pre-existing biblical and regional traditions, where pharaoh was understood as a specific figure rather than a generic title. This is similar to how Caesar or Khosrow were sometimes used in Arabic as names for specific rulers, despite being titles. 3. Alternative interpretations. Possible title interpretation. Some scholars propose that pharaoh in the Quran could still be understood as a title, but its grammatical form as a name reflects a stylistic or rhetorical choice. For example, the Quran may use pharaoh to emphasize the unique arrogance and tyranny of this ruler, personifying him as a symbol of oppression. Historical ambiguity. The Quran does not specify which historical pharaoh is meant, for example, Ramesses II, Merneptah, or others, and scholarly attempts to identify him are speculative. The Quran's focus is theological, portraying pharaoh as a symbol of hubris and defiance against God, rather than providing a precise historical account. Biblical influence. Critics argue that the Quran's use of pharaoh as a name may stem from its reliance on biblical narratives, which also use pharaoh without distinguishing it as a title. However, the Quran's selective use of king for Joseph's ruler suggests an awareness of different contexts, possibly drawn from non-biblical traditions or oral stories. 4. Theological significance in the Quran. The Quran depicts Pharaoh as a tyrant who claims divinity and oppresses the Israelites, ordering the killing of their newborn sons while sparing their women. Surah 2 Ayat 49. God sends Moses and Aaron to confront Pharaoh, urging him to worship the one God and free the Israelites. Pharaoh's refusal leads to divine signs, for example, Moses' staff turning into a serpent, Surah 7 Ayat 104 to 107, and ultimately his drowning in the sea, Surah 10 Ayat 90 to 92. The Quran states that Pharaoh's body was preserved as a sign for future generations, Surah 10 Ayat 92, which some interpret as referring to mummification, though historical evidence linking this to a specific pharaoh like Merneptah, is inconclusive. 5. Conclusion. The Quran's use of Pharaoh as a name rather than a title is not a mistake, but a deliberate narrative choice, likely influenced by biblical and regional traditions where Pharaoh was understood as a specific figure. The distinction between Pharaoh, for Moses, ruler and king, for Joseph's ruler, suggests an awareness of different historical or narrative contexts, though the Quran prioritizes theological lessons over historical precision. The lack of a definite article before Pharaoh supports the view that it is treated as a name, aligning with the Quran's rhetorical style to emphasize this ruler's unique role as an antagonist to Moses.